Okay, so good afternoon. We'll get this started. Thank you for joining us today. So my name, if you don't know who I am, I'm Yannis Paschalidis, and I'm the director of the Hariri Institute. And we have been hosting the data science mentoring circles since its very beginning. So the program, the Data Science Mentoring Circles program, have started in 2020. And since that time, it has been hosted at the Hariri Institute. And the purpose of the program, as you probably know, is to support graduate students at BU that are pursuing a degree, typically a graduate degree in a number of different disciplines, and they are interested in continuing their career in industry, working as a data scientist. So this is an opportunity for them to connect with people that have been through the same process, are now in industry, are in important positions, leadership positions in industry, and can provide them with advice and also with possibly some connections in facilitating their move and the start of their career. The program, since the beginning, since 2020, has been able to accommodate 230 graduate students. Just think about this number. 230 is a very large number of graduate students that have benefited from this program. And the program also benefited from 44 exceptional mentors that have participated and provided the mentorship opportunity to our students. Several of the students that have gone through the program have been able to find good positions in industry, full-time positions in industry. And if you go to the Hariri Institute's website, we cover the program, and there you can find some stories about the trajectories of the students that have gone through the program and where they ended up. So before we start, what we have planned today is a panel discussion, and I would like to encourage you to participate as much as you can in this panel discussion. Before we start, I would like to thank two individuals that have been very important for this program. So Ranfei Xu, who is currently leading the program for last year and this year as well. And also I would like to thank Clementine Plati, who was the person that initiated this program and is now acting in an advisory capacity to the program. So before we start the panel discussion, some housekeeping remarks. As I said, I'll start to warm things up with a few questions, but then please jump in, please ask any questions you may have. We'll be recording the event, we'll make it available at the Hariri Institute YouTube page. So if you want to ask a question, please come to the microphone so that you can be recorded. So with that, let me introduce the two panelists for today. These are two of the mentors that have participated in the program. We originally planned for a somewhat larger panel. We had 4 panelists have invited, but 2 of them, unfortunately, for family emergencies, they had to cancel, and obviously we understand and we hope that they would join at some event in the future. So our 2 panelists, so this is roughly the schedule. Will take about an hour for the discussion, and then there are drinks outside and some things to eat so that the discussions can continue and you can I guess, get to know our panelists better, and also probably get to know some of you that I'm sure you don't know each other, all of you. So I mentioned Ranfei and Clementine. And now let me introduce our 2 panelists. It's a great pleasure to have them here today. Iyue Sang, who is the Director for Clinical Data Science at Walgreens, and Manu Martinet, who is a Senior Scientist at Generate Biomedicines. So thank you for being here today. And I guess I'll start with a question. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about your current role, where you are, so what are your responsibilities, and perhaps you can, after describing your role, tell us what you find the most rewarding, the most enjoying aspect of your function in your company. So let's start in random order. We'll start with Manu. Okay.
All right. So hi, I'm Manu. So I'm a data scientist at Generate Biomedicines. So I joined the company only last November, and I can talk later about my recent sort of like unfortunate being laid off back in May and then looking for a job. So that might be some interesting info for you. But the new company that I joined in November, it's a company where we are trying to develop new drugs using those new approach with generative models, but applied to designing new proteins for developing new drugs. And so in that context, as part of the data science team, I'm here to be the link between the wet lab data, where we measure a lot of the characteristics of the protein that we design, and then being able to get those data, measure some characteristics about the data quality, properties, and then being able to plug that into our ML models to make them better, and having this sort of feedback loop between the wet lab and the dry lab being the machine learning models. So my role there is really to be the bridge between the scientists that are doing experiments and the hardcore ML scientists that are developing those generative models. Yeah, I don't know, as a quick introduction.
Maybe the most rewarding
like?
aspect.
So what I like about the job is that it's a new domain for me. In my previous company, I was still in biology. I've always worked in biology in a general sense. In my previous company, I was in the agriculture and microbiology, so bacteria and fungi domain. And I sort of like got interested, very excited about these generative machine learning models. Like you probably all know about the ChatGPT application of generative models, but the application to protein design sounded very excited to me. So I sort of like jumped on that train. But it's very exciting because it's a new domain. It's also very challenging because there is a lot for me to learn. But that's part of the reason why I'm excited to do that new role, is because I get to learn a lot of things. So that's the part I enjoyed the most. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Iyue, rhymes with kiwi fruit. I manage the data science team at Walgreens. I graduated a long time ago across the street with a math major. And then I went and finished my doctorate in statistics at Ohio State. So that's my background in data science. I joined Walgreens about a year and a half ago. Clinical Trial Services is the division that I work in. It is related to drug development, but my science taps out at 9th grade biology. So what the team I manage and what we do in data science at Walgreens is a pretty typical data science team. Let me back up. Clinical Trial Services at Walgreens, they provide services to pharma, including perhaps Generate, I don't know, in this particular example. But we have three main businesses. One is recruitment. Drug companies have to have clinical trials, of course, to test out the drugs. And so we help these sponsors find patients to recruit. New diabetes drug that they want to test. What do? We look for diabetics who are Walgreens patients to recruit them to participate in these clinical trials. It's essentially targeted marketing, but it's not marketing. It's recruitment. But technically speaking, it's not unlike Starbucks or Amazon sending you spam to get for 25% off your Frappuccino. The concept is, let's look for people who fit the profile of who we're looking for. Again, simple examples, diabetics in a certain age range. The second business is study conduct. Study conduct means we have 8,000 to 9,000 Walgreens across the country, and so far in the last 2 years, we've set up 20 of those Walgreens sites to function as clinical trial sites. What that means is you can go to that Walgreens and get your lab blood drawn there and be a participant in the study instead of, like me, no way I'm going to drive from Marblehead into the city to participate in a study because that's half of my day gone. I'm not going to do that. There is actually a site in Malden, which is only about 20 minutes away. I would do that. So that's the idea. And the idea is to increase the number of Walgreens stores where you can go there and participate in a study. So if you live in Idaho, that means you don't have to drive to Seattle, and no one's going to drive to Seattle from Idaho. And the third business is real-world evidence and pharmacoepidemiology. So for those of you who get into pharma, you'll hear that a lot. Real-world evidence, real-world data just means using observational data like the pharmacy data, or if you work for a hospital, or if you work for an insurance company, there's a lot of healthcare data there that's used for research. So we use that to do either retrospective analysis, observational studies, or prospective analysis, recruiting patients and say, hey, if you want to participate in the study, here's a new drug that just came on the market. We're going to create a instrument, a survey, and ask you over a year to report on symptoms if you have them, right? So that's a prospective study. And so the data science team is responsible for all things analytics and data related to those three different businesses. For recruitment, we're trying to find patients and sending them emails and text messages to participate in the studies. So writing a lot of SQL queries, developing potentially models to identify patients who might be a good fit. Same thing for the study conduct. Instead of recruiting patients to go to a traditional site, we will recruit them to go to the Walgreens sites. And then the third is the real-world evidence work and the prospective work, and that's pulling data together, designing surveys, and also the analysis, the biostats, building the models, doing whatever data analysis needs to be done. And then there's a lot of data engineering also. Whether you work for Walgreens or Amazon or Starbucks, a data team like our team has to understand how the transactional data is structured and where it's stored, because you're using that data for your analysis. It's really no different from, I'm sure, what Starbucks has, right? But instead of the purchases of whatever they're selling, Starbucks is selling, it's whatever you're purchasing or picking up from Walgreens. It's the same structure. We're just obviously applying it in a completely different context, but the skill set's the same. What I enjoy is this business, this clinical trial services business, is only 2.5 years old. And so we had to build everything from scratch. That includes, we're interested in identifying patients who picked up certain products in the front of the store, not the pharmacy, but the front of the store, because that may actually help us be more targeted, right? Example is, are they picking up a COVID test kit? That's a simple example if it's a COVID study. So we have to go find the people at Walgreens, a big company, 300,000 people. What's the data team that can help us understand how to access that data so we can find these people? That's one simple example. And then, of course, building out the team, hiring, and then just being able to see the development of a solution from beginning to end, problem solving.
Let me ask you, are you acting are these studies initiated by Walgreens, or are you acting more as, I guess, a broker between scientists that may be coming with an idea for the study and then providing to them the platform where they can run their study?
Sure. For recruitment, it's definitely sponsors coming to us. So we are a vendor. Drug company has a new drug that have a drug they want to test in a clinical trial. They can come to Walgreens, they can go to CVS, or they used to go to CVS. I think CVS is no longer doing that. But and then the traditional sites. Basically, we need to find patients to recruit for this study. And so they come to us, and we bid on the projects just like any other vendor. And we definitely can't, we are the ones that tell them how we would go about finding these patients, because it's up to us. And then, we get awarded the study, and then we get paid to find those patients. The RWE work, the retrospective analysis or the prospective analysis, we work very closely with our sponsors to design the study. We put together the statistical analysis plan with them. But first they come to us. It could be that the FDA is telling them that you need to do a real-world evidence study. Once a drug is approved and your doctor starts prescribing it, that's not the end of research on that drug. So there's, I'm not the expert here on what happens post-marketing, but I have been doing this long enough to know that the FDA often requires studies. And so whether it's with Walgreens or other research organizations, they come to us with the idea, and then we work with them to fine-tune it.
Okay, fantastic. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep going. So, so maybe another question that I would like to ask is, we ask you about what is most exciting, most rewarding aspect of your job. If you can now go on the other side, what is perhaps the biggest challenge or opportunity for improvement that you see, what keeps you up at night, and discuss that with us.
Sure. I already sort of started to answer that question before, so I think for me, with that new position, the challenge has been to get involved in that new domain. So there's a lot of domain expertise to gain in terms of biology. There's also a lot of theoretical ML knowledge to get. So I think overall the sort of technical growth required for the role has been both exciting and a challenge. So that's one aspect. Another aspect that is completely different, and I'm going to jump back to my previous work because I have more experience from there, is the sort of whole effort that it takes from ideation of a new model or new pipeline to getting that tool actually being used in production, so being used by someone in the company or a team, and the different challenge that needs to get there. So you might have talked about that in classes or in different aspects, but there's the data aspect, is your data usable? Do you need to transform it? Do you need to prepare it? Do you need to talk to people who generated that data? So in my case, because it's biological data, so in my previous role, we were looking at experimental data coming from field trials. So we were trying products in farmers' field and then collecting data from that. So those can be challenging data to work on. So there's that whole aspect. Then you build a model to try to infer some characteristics about those data. The problem is that in my case, the challenging experience was that there was already a model for explaining the data, and we proposed a new one that we were convinced was better. But you have a lot of work to do in terms of communication and outreach to convince your stakeholder that this is the right direction to take. And sometimes it can get into almost conflicting situation when people are used to a particular approach and they don't like the idea of changing. So what I'm talking about is basically this notion of resistance to change. And I don't know if you've experienced with that, but I've found it both interesting and challenging because it's not at all a technical skills. It's what people would refer to like soft skills. You know, like how do you talk to your stakeholders or other teams to actually convince them that what you're doing has a technical value and a general business value, and that should be the direction that the company should be taking. So I think that that was something that was challenging, but ultimately rewarding when we managed to get our project like in production. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting experience in learning what it is to work as a larger organization.
I think the biggest challenge is around organization, which is, overlaps with what Manu was mentioning. And this is not just, this is everywhere I've been. I've been at a lot of different companies. Last 15 years, again, it's a pretty similar job that I've had, which is managing data science teams that works with a lot of other functions. So definitely the engineering team. We work very closely with the data engineering team. So we do engineering-ish work, but we're not engineers, right? So we're best friends with the data team who are responsible for managing this huge enterprise-level databases. And then there's the sales team. There's project management and marketing and so forth. So just coordinating work and staying on top of what needs to be done, that's wherever you go, that's going to be the most challenging thing. It's not even one place. Especially, and it doesn't matter whether it's a startup or a huge company, it's all the same problem because why? What's the common factor? People. That's it. And we are by default lazy, and we don't like friction. We don't like friction. What's friction? Friction is people with conflicting calendar schedules. Friction is people with different philosophies. None of it is bad, but that's just the nature. So I'm sure you're all super smart, high IQ, irrelevant. It's all about how organized you are, how you're able to work with other people, and that will always be the case. Whether you work for a private company or you work for a large university, I know the same problems that, so anywhere where there's an organization with people, you're going to have the same problem.
So maybe if I can add a little bit to that. I fully agree, absolutely. Before I became the director, I was directing a smaller research center, and much smaller operation, enterprise, fewer people at that research center. So essentially my main challenges were the challenges of any faculty doing research, attracting funding for the work, attracting graduate students, and coordinating this amazing group of graduate students that I had the opportunity to work with over the years. But now becoming a director of the Hariri Institute, when I was considering this opportunity, when they came to me about this opportunity, I asked one of my mentors and close friends, and his response was that it's a great opportunity, think about it carefully, but when you start dealing with people, things can get complicated, and that indeed has been part of my daily job and the challenge managing an organization that has many great people that want to contribute, but sometimes bringing everyone on the same page and in sync towards a certain goal, and managing expectations and managing personalities is an important challenge. Absolutely, definitely.
And to be clear, like, you still need to be good technically, but that's what you learn at school, and those are the things that are sort of like what you've been working on for the past few years. So those skills to work with people, I mean, you've probably been working on them already with your groups of friends or with your family or with everything that happened with your social life, but I feel it's still like a sort of like a step up when you go in a larger organization and you need to understand how things are working.
And of course, scale is a factor, right? Because the complexity doesn't grow linearly with the number of people. It's a non-linear function. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a question for the Okay, yeah. So my question was about the Walgreens, actually. So, I've been following the news, and there's, I think, like there's like a private equity acquisition of Walgreens right now, and there has been some challenges in the past years that, some organizational challenges, some closing of like pharmacies, and I guess some internal structure problems as well. What I'm getting is that I was just going to ask, how does this affect you, and are you worried about this transition? And as a director, like, to what extent you are in friction with the upper management, or are they really interfere with your job? And or are you worried about the future aspect? Because I'm really worried about the business side. Not worried, I'm curious about the business side and how it affects you. Because I think, like, being in these positions requires you to be in contact with the upper management. I think, I don't know. That's what
not really. Not. So I think the best way to think about clinical trial services, we're like a startup within a huge company. That said, it's still business as usual for us. I know that sounds like a corporate line, but there hasn't been any changes. I've been, I've been through BIOS before, so one of my previous jobs, a PE firm, bought and sold twice. It all depends on the situation, but in this case, it's still business as usual. I've not met with any of the upper management of Walgreens, so it doesn't really affect this startup's day to day.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I just I probably missed that part, that you're like operating as a startup inside a big company. So
yeah, well, for sure, we have to succeed as a business, because we are a business. Just like any large business has businesses. Amazon has businesses within Amazon, so obviously at a larger scale. Each of those specific business units have to make sure they succeed. So I think for us, it's about us clinical trials succeeding.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
So I think most of us are graduating from graduate school in the next year or so, and I just was wondering, as people who have had jobs established in leadership positions, what you think new grads can do to make the most of their job applications and resumes to kind of stand out amongst the many applicants that we are seeing in the data science field nowadays.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to sort of like not answer the question and say that just because I went through recently like a similar experience, it's not the same when you have already been working, but I'm going to talk about the sea of resume that companies are receiving. So my main advice would be to actually work more on your network, than your resume, though you need to have like a great resume and things like that. But I feel like if I had a limited amount of time that I can spend on those things, I would spend on trying to meet new people and get connected with people, because I think that's, in the current context, it might be a good strategy, because I think there is just, because of the layoffs and new people coming into the market like that, I think it's a very competitive market. There are positions open, like if you go on LinkedIn and search for jobs, like there are a lot of jobs, but there are a lot of people applying, and so we can talk about the resume. But you probably talked about it already with your mentors, like during the whole year. But yeah, I would sort my non-answer would be to spend a fair amount of time on expanding your network, and we can talk about that in more details. But yeah.
No, I think network is not a non-answer. It's it's the first answer, because that's how I found one of my jobs, a couple of my jobs. So it's true. You definitely should work on your network, and part of it is, especially grad students or early career. When I say early career, I mean at 1, 2, 3 years in the job out of the grad school. Reach out on LinkedIn is the obvious one, or however, and I think more often than not, you will get a response, because people like me, or at least I enjoy talking to grad students or early career professionals, because it's me promoting this profession, and then also it's like, oh, you want to talk to me, a little bit of that too, right? Oh, okay. And so I would encourage you to do that for sure. And then also in terms of your resume or your interview, maybe it's different for me, but maybe there will be people who interview you who aren't technical, and they're going to see all these buzzwords and they're going to be super impressed. And then you might run into someone like me. I will ask you a simple question, and your words will turn into a word salad. And then I'll know right away that what you have on your resume, I'm not going to believe. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if it's on your resume, you better be prepared. That's my advice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
My favorite question is, what's the difference between statistics and machine learning? 100% of the time, word salad. Know
I'll
your
prepare
stuff.
for that one.
It's the same thing.
And just to give like a personal example of what I was saying with networking, the job I have right now, I applied back in July, just sending my resume, and I didn't hear from anyone. And I tried again like 2 months later, because in between I had explored and thought about things. But this time I managed to find someone who knew someone, and this time like I got an answer the next day. They were like, oh yeah, like let's talk, like so and so like said like you had an interesting background, so let's chat. And my resume was exactly the same. It's just like in one situation I sent it among the pile, and the other situation I got on top of the pile. So it's really powerful sometimes.
I just want to add, it's a volume game. It's not about, you may be perfectly qualified, but every time there's a job opening that on my team, there's like 300 to 500 resumes, right? No way I or the recruiter that's working with me is going to go through 500 resumes. So it's a matter of chance. Did they happen to look in that pile at the right time? So a lot of it is luck. It's not you. So that's why, I've gone through this. I've been laid off a couple times. It's a volume game. You got to just, I'm sure you've heard it before. Finding a job is a job. You have to treat it as such. And it's just, application after application, right? No one's going to come looking for you, because they don't know you exist.
So on top of like the networking, just also trying to get as many applications and resumes out there.
Right, talking to as many. Yeah, it's not one thing, right? Nothing is ever one thing. There's no bad. You have to do everything, right? Yeah.
But to give you like another personal example on that, for this particular job search, I applied to 60 positions. So I know it may or may not be a large number, but it was not like automated application through, like automated system. It was like really I picked position that I knew I was a good fit. So it was like not either applying to anything and everything, but it's still like a bunch, it's work because you still have to refine your resume. Your mentor might have mentioned that you tune your resume a little bit, you tune your motivation letter, and you still try also for each position, try to see if there is someone in your first or second degree on LinkedIn that might know someone so that you can say, oh, by the way, I'm sending my resume. So it's definitely a lot of work, yeah.
And also perhaps something else to mention, there is already an existing network, right? The network that your advisor has. So leveraging that network is extremely important. And that network also includes former alumni from the program. You have examples here, but there's a much broader network. So finding those connections, people that have gone through a similar path that are now at some position or some company that you have an interest, and sending them a direct message that I'm so-and-so, I'm in this program, I'm applying. By the way, here is my resume that I submitted. Sometimes this gets you on top of the pile, as Iyue mentioned.
Thank you so much.
I think I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
This question is coming from our survey. They asked how to navigate our job search in today's bad job market. Any suggestion, changing trends, etc. we should be aware of? So other than networking, build our beautiful resumes, like get prepared for our interviews, is there anything else we need to be aware of?
I think what we already said. You just have to keep applying. There's no. Obviously, the job market, to put it mildly, is uncertain right now. So that aside, assuming that the chaos will subside, or regardless, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what Trump decides. You're still going to have to apply to a bunch of jobs, period. Even if he changes his tune on tariffs, even if it was three months ago, you would have to do the same thing. Maybe look for a different job for less pay. That's the other thing. Don't chase money. You've heard it before. You'll hear it again. When you're new, when your early career, don't chase money. The money will come. The experience is more important. I don't know. Let's just say average salary is $100,000 for a data scientist. Okay. Go work for $70,000. Go work for $80,000 to get the experience. Because then 10 years from now, you'll be making more than if you just chase the money. Don't ever go, it's like, oh, I'm going to get $10,000 more per year. That's a lot for someone who just graduated and has, I don't even want to know what BU's tuition is. But, again, the experience is invaluable because you're going to learn a lot, and that's what's going to pay off in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, to build on what you were saying for the experience, what was sort of interesting to me is that I was a postdoc for quite a long time here at the Biomedicines department, and I had my LinkedIn profile up and running, not very well maintained, I have to say, but like no one got in touch with me ever for like, oh, are you interested? But as soon as I sort of like, after sort of like my first year and even more after my second year of working in a company, it was a better job market for sure, but then I started to get recruiter just, asking to talk. So it doesn't mean like you would get the job, but they are doing a search, and so they are searching for profile, and then some recruiter will actually start to talk to you just because you have already an experience. So in just like reinforcing what you're saying, like that having, starting somewhere is then helping. And
they're going to look for those keywords, right?
Yeah.
Those keywords that you were able to put on your resume or your LinkedIn profile because you built that experience.
Yeah. And then another thought that I had was around the process also. So I was talking about like networking, and it's sort of like a vague term. In my recent experience, like something that I did and that I actually enjoyed was just getting in touch with people that I've known in the past few years, and just having informational sort of like interview with them, like just discussion, be like, oh, like, what are you? Those are not friends, those are people, those are ex-colleagues or like colleagues of colleagues, like in sort of like wider sense, and just asking them about what they're doing now, what's happening in their companies, and just doing that, you refresh a bond with a person, and that person might know something else, or later in your job search, and that happened to me, you actually want to apply to that particular company that they're working at, so you can get in touch again. So those informational interview, I think, are very useful, and you can do them like Iyue was saying, like to random people that you don't know, and I think a lot of people are very okay with that. Like a nice message on LinkedIn goes a long way, and I've done that several times. That people from BU or some students in the Boston area just wanted to chat about what is it to work in the company that I was working at, and you say, I just want like half an hour of your time. We can meet on Zoom, or I can come to your workplace and get you and we can get a coffee together. And a lot of people are willing to do that. So I think that's a great way to start your network when you don't have a lot of contacts. Yeah.
Maybe if I can add one more thought, is that obviously data science, AI is a field that moves very, very fast, and I think having an eye out for what is happening in the field, even though that may not necessarily be the project, the research project that you have been involved with, is important, and anticipating where things are going to move. Maybe there are a lot of companies that are looking for LLM expertise, and spending some of your personal time in keeping up with developments, particularly because they happen at this very fast pace. That would be, I think, very useful and extremely important.
Yeah, and you were asking also like about the resume earlier, and I'm just gonna expand for that in terms of skills. When I was sort of like reviewing resume from candidate, what I like to see or get the impression is that I have a potentially well-rounded candidate, because in the type of work that I've been doing, you've mentioned it, like we are kind of engineers, even if we're not fully software engineer. You still, in a lot of positions, not all, but in a lot of positions, you still have to do a lot of software engineering to build pipelines, build tools, and things like that. So I'd like to see a candidate that can demonstrate some kind of skills like that, because if you only a statistician or like an expert in ML, but you can't write like proper code, I know it's going to be a little bit more painful for me to get you onboarded in the team. If you're very junior, that's okay. We can sort of like work with that. But if you're in competition with someone that is a little bit more well-rounded and knows how to, code, reasonably nice Python code, in addition to be skillful in machine learning, I think that makes a difference. So, yeah, just in terms of like evaluating your skills when you apply, think about like how well-rounded as a candidate you are.
So since we're talking about AI, let me ask another question. Do your companies use AI and LLMs in reviewing applications? And your thoughts on, I don't know if it's happening. I'm sure in some companies it does happen. So if you can talk about your own company, but also if you can talk about your thoughts about that process.
You probably do more AI than I do.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So I mentioned that the company is using generative AI for designing new proteins. So it's definitely like a direct use of generating generative AI. It's not exactly the same LLMs kind of tools, but it's really the same. It's somewhat similar architecture that are under the hood. But we also use, in the daily life, we also use, how do you say, like coding assistant and things like that. Like, when programming, you might be familiar with like tools that you can have in VS Code or Cursor or like similar tools like that sort of like potentially improve your efficiency when you're building up code. So we're using that also in that fashion, just as for the more like software engineering part. Even for more like data science work, the other day, I was amazed that I was almost literally talking to my Jupyter notebook, be like, can you make a curve of that thing and that thing that I was interested in? Just because I had forgotten what was exact Plotly function that I wanted to use and the parameters, and it just like made a solid like base for me in like 1 second, and then I could tune it. So even for things like that, that's just making your life much easier. It's not giving you new ideas about how to properly analyze data, but it's making you faster at doing those kind of things. So yeah, I don't know.
We, at least the data science team in clinical trials, we're starting to use it a little bit, use it in the context of, like a search engine, right? How do I write this piece of code in SQL or Python or whatnot, for sure. And then we're starting to explore using LLMs to interpret clinical trials protocol. A clinical trials protocol, which I am definitely not qualified to read, but we do want to take those protocols and distill them into criteria to find patients that roughly fit that criteria. And so we're starting to use that to say, hey, what are the diagnoses, what are the drugs that correspond to the protocol, and asking these LLMs those questions instead of going through a dense 100, 200-page protocol. So that's one simple example. And then, so that's generative AI. Separately, machine learning, which I don't consider AI at all, it's just curve fitting. We're using that too, in the traditional sense. And then I think it's also important for those of you on the job market to understand that you're going to see a lot of jobs asking for AI-related skills. I think the market's still sorting that out. I think people are still, meaning hiring managers are still trying to figure out and getting confused between the developers of generative AI, like the engineers and data scientists who work for like OpenAI or Anthropic, right? They are the ones building the general purpose models, whereas most of the data scientists are the end users of that AI. And so making sure you understand that you, in the end, need to become familiar with how to use those tools as opposed to building those tools. So I still think the market employer market is still sorting that out, because companies still aren't really sure, at least from what I've seen, what to do. most of what I've seen so far is, oh, another chatbot.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with chatbots, but that's really not making me work fewer hours, you know. Yeah, so at least from day to day, it's still pretty much the same. I'll give you one simple example. Again, Walgreens data, just like Amazon or Starbucks, that data comes from transactional systems. What I mean by that is every time you buy a thing or return a thing or you click on an app, that's generating a record in their transactional system. That database wasn't designed for you as a data scientist to do research, right? You have to do a lot of data engineering of that raw data and transform it into a form for you to do whatever it is you need to do. There's no LLM that's going to say, hey, take this massive database that's basically spaghetti code, simplify and have a nice flat file for me. Not going to happen. So you're never going to get at least not in my lifetime, I don't think, get away from having to really understand how these large databases are structured and built, and being able to then wrangle that data into a form for you to analyze. And no AI is going to do that for you.
Yeah, and I would like to add also that you've probably started to look at job descriptions, and sometimes it looks like they want you to know everything. And so it's been like that forever in the data science field. Like even like, I feel like years and years ago, it was not the same keywords, but it was still like you basically needed to know everything that was the rage at the time. And so now there's also these new lines about like AI or LLMs, but you really need to practice reading in between the lines here. Like what is it really that they are trying to do? Because sometimes the person that write the job description is not necessarily directly the hiring manager, and so sometimes the person from the people team will sort of like add things to sort of like make the job description well-rounded and sort of like try to capture some interest from candidates that are out there. And so I think it's in interesting skills to try and practice seeing in those job description what is it really that they are looking for. And so if they say that they want you to be expert with transformers, it's different than just being comfortable with using LLMs to do things. Like for example, just before starting that job, I was a contractor for 2 months as a machine learning engineer, and here the job with LLMs was essentially just software engineer. Like I was just writing code that was connecting on OpenAI API and running some prompt. So it was like some kind of prompt engineering, things like that. I personally did not enjoy doing that, but it's in that particular context, like being comfortable with LLM just meant being able to write code that connect to the API. So there was like no need to know anything about transformers or like complex architecture. So those are the sort of like things that might be unclear sometimes in job descriptions.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. I have a question for Manu. I'm really interested in your new work about the use the generative learning models to find new drugs, to find the protein structures. I think it's a very promising directions because in this year, the Nobel Prize chemistry is given by the, I don't remember the professor's name. It's in the University of Washington, or the David Baker lab. Baker. Yes, they use the generative AI to create new proteins. In the past, the people in the biology, they need to buy very expensive machines and to find such protein structures, but now they use the machine learning models. So I think it's very promising. And go back to the work. So I see that in your previous work, you use some traditional statistical methods, right, like Bayesian modeling, or use SQL or some traditional models, and now you transfer to the machine learning field. I think it's very good direction, and it's also what I want to do. But similarly here, I'm the PhD student in statistics. Currently my work is also like rely on very traditional methods. For example, I use stochastic process, PD, ODE models. But when you go to the industry, people just say, oh, we don't use such things. So I want to go to like have more experience in machine learning. But I found one difficulty is the first one, the machine learning, I think, moves very fast. Every 1 or 2 months, something new happens, right? It's very hard to capture the new trend. And the second one is it becomes harder because they need very good resources to learn the skills. Not like before, if we want to study statistics or mathematics, we just use R, it's open source, right? Everyone has a laptop, they can study the math or statistics. But now, if you want to study machine learning, the AI, you need very good GPUs, right? There are such good sources. So, for example, when you do this transferring, how do you start to get, how should I say, to study learning this machine learning new skills, and how do you have any suggested resources or I don't know, like platform, I don't know, activities, lessons, online platforms helps you to dive into this field? Thank you.
Sure. So, so first of all, I just want to clarify that in my daily job right now, I'm not the one that is developing those new generative AI for protein, right? Like I've more of a classic data scientist role of like handling data, biological data, and preparing them and studying their characteristics to then be used as feature for those models. So that was my way to get into that domain, was to use my strengths, which was this sort of like familiarity with working with biological data, and sort of like marketing that as a way to show that I would bring value to the company in that aspect. So what I'm trying to say is, like, sometimes when you want to transition into a new field, it might be too big of a step to go directly to exactly where you when you would love to be, but sort of like play with your strengths to sort of like enter through the door that might be the best strategy as a first step, and then grow from there within the company. So ideally, like, I'm not sure where, because I've only been there for less than 6 months, so, but I would love to evolve and sort of like get to have a more well-rounded view of like everything that is happening on the machine learning side in the company, and see how I can contribute to that. But in that particular domain, the knowledge is extremely niche. Like, it's like generative model to generate sequence of amino acids to, you know, that hopefully will have the right structure when they fall into the protein that will be able to capture a particular antigen. So you need to have some specific biological knowledge and machine learning knowledge. Like, people that are doing that in my company, they did that as a PhD and maybe as a postdoc. So I can't just be like, can I join your team, you know? So you sort of have to think about a strategy to get there, and it might take some time if it's not your initial training. So that's one aspect of my answer. And the second aspect is like resources. Internet is infinite in terms of like resources for machine learning and things like that. So I don't know that I would have something specific to say. Like, I did, you know, classic course on like Coursera and platforms like that, and then some like specific, you know, YouTube, following some specific sort of like thought leaders on YouTube, or people who have strong technical skills and sort of walk you through different aspects of it. So I feel it's sort of like two different things. Like, because even if you study that and you start to be good, as long as it's not showing in any fashion on your resume, it's going to be sort of hard for you to market that. And so that's why I'm saying, like, if you can transition in a role where, I mean, it sounds like you would have like terrific, like, theoretical skills, and I'm absolutely sure that you can learn all the rest of machine learning with what you know already. But from a very strategic career direction, it might be easier to potentially start a job where you could use those skills that you have right now, but then, and that's the people aspect, like if you hear about project happening in the company, be like, hey, like, I have like a bit of time, like 10%, could I, spend 10% of my time helping on that project because I'd like to grow in that direction. And teams and like managers, they really, in a good company, they care about your professional growth and that you are happy at the company, because most of the time you don't want to see people go, because it's a huge pain to hire someone new and retrain them and things like that. So people will accommodate if you say like, I'm really interested in that, can I sort of like spend X% of the time, as long as you're still doing the rest of your duties, that can be a great way to then get some skills, and then maybe you can evolve internally, or then you can just update your resume and start to market yourself as having some experience with those topics. So
let me add something, and then I want to ask a final question, because I see that we're getting past the hour mark, and I know that we stand between you and what is out there. I guess your question had two aspects. One, my understanding is when you talked about resources, you also talked about computational resources, and that is a big issue. There is a lot of work in the AI space happening at BU, and maybe it's impossible for everyone to be involved in those projects and connect with the faculty and the teams that are working on those types of projects. And on the computational aspect, there are some resources available, but you don't necessarily have to write the model that would develop an 1.5 trillion LLM, where you need a huge number of GPUs. I think what is more important is to sort of learn the type coding pipelines that are being used in some of these models, rather than sort of running large versions of these models. And in terms of sort of understanding what's happening, there are many seminars that are taking place, including many that we are hosting here at the Institute. So being on top of opportunities to at least get an understanding or get a feel of some of the work that is being done on the research front, that would be very useful. So with having in mind the time limits that we have, maybe I'll ask one question, and I'll ask for maybe 2-minute answers or even shorter. Now you have had the experience of being in a number of different companies, in a number of different roles. If you sort of had an opportunity to go back in time, in a time machine, and think about your own professional development, what would be some of the things that you will perhaps consider doing differently that you have realized after the fact that some of the decisions or the paths that you took were sort of not straight paths to where you wanted to end up? Maybe I start with Iyue and then go to Manu and close.
Sure. I would have had lunch with my colleagues more often. That's it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I have great relationships and a network, over my career, but it could always be deeper and broader, because in the end, that's people.
It's all about people.
Yeah, you're all smart enough for sure, but what's going to help you is other people.
I would say stay curious, keep learning, and think about yourself. And the last one is I have a tendency to become very attached to teams because like I built strong connection, and colleagues are, in my last company, my colleagues became my friends. And also I was really attached to the job and to what we were building. But ultimately, that's that's a little bit more cynical because, I went through that layoff process. Like, you still just, a piece on the checkboard. And so you have to keep thinking about how you're going to continue developing yourself, and maybe think about when it's time to move on from a particular position. Like, I think now that I stayed too long in my previous company, and I should have started to pack up and go somewhere to continue growing in my career. But I enjoyed the daily work a lot. I enjoyed my colleagues, so it's sort of like easy to get in a comfortable place. And it's not bad either. Like, it's just like if you ask me now, like, what I would do differently, maybe I would start to think about how to continue thinking about what I'm going to do next. Because if I don't decide what I'm going to do next, someone else is going to decide for me, and maybe it's something to keep thinking about.
Yeah, organizations don't love you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta take care of yourself first, because in the end, it's these organizations, understandably, have to make a decision to keep that organization going. So don't take it personally.
Yeah.
It's a lot different now than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it's like, oh, you've only been at this job for 2 years. Now it's like, the business cycles are much faster, so everybody's resume is 2, 3 years. Do I want to stay longer? Of course, right? But you always have to be prepared.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think let's close the discussion today. I would like to thank you for being here and for what you have done for this program. I would also like to thank Ranfei for running the program again this year and for making today's event happen. And you can connect with the Institute, and there are multiple ways in which you can do that. And I would like to invite you to join the reception. Thank you.
Before starting our networking session, let's thank Yannis for moderating this really fabulous conversations, and thanks for the Hariri Institute to providing all of the staffs to help us operate this program. Thank you.
Thank you.